No one is infallible. As much as we want everything to be perfect, we all make mistakes here and there. But in the property industry, making even a single one can be costly, a multi-million-dollar blunder for some people. Today, we share our top 3 mistakes that home buyers make.
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Meighan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together, we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Today we're talking about the top 3 mistakes that you could be making without even knowing it. So we are here to share these with you so that you can avoid making them. But before we get into what they are...
This is what we want to do, Veronica.
Exactly right. Very easy to make these, and this is why they are the top 3 mistakes, because they are made the most amount of times.
Yeah.
And so you can avoid it by listening to this podcast, by doing your first home buyer guide. You can avoid these mistakes. But before we get into that, there is a house in the video behind Meighan today.
Check this out. This is what one of our students bought. So this is an absolute cracker. This is in Brisbane, and it was bought as their first property to rent vest. So it is a typical post-war sort of style home, about 10 kilometres from the CBD, and it was purchased for under $1 million. And I just wanted to show that to people because that's really what you're sort of aiming for, this kind of style of property. I know I put some really funky, fun things behind me sometimes, but this is the real stuff. And this has actually been bought by people who did the course, who bought really, really well.
Excellent. And they bought really, really well because they learned all the things that you are going to learn in this episode, and they did not make these mistakes. So over to you, Meighan. What is our first mistake?
Look, I think this is a really big one, and people don't do this on purpose, but it's kind of rolls along, and that is taking advice from the wrong people. And we've got well-meaning people in our lives, all sorts of different people, really, really well-meaning, but they might not necessarily give you the right advice. And this is really, really important because you've got to have your radar on. You've got to know who to talk to and what to talk to them about, and then make sure it applies to you, whether it's your parents, your friends. Obviously, spruikers. We want you to not listen to spruikers. We want you to listen to mortgage brokers, but for the right reasons and about the right questions. All of these people want to give you help, but their knowledge might not actually be as helpful as you think it is.
Now, if you've been listening to our podcasts for a while, you would have heard us bang on about this quite a bit. And the reason we bang on about it is because it's a really big problem. And when we spend our time, sometimes we trawl through Facebook groups for first home buyers.
We want to know what people are asking and what they're thinking.
We do, and we see and hear evidence that this is going on all the time, where people are in a Facebook group. It's a classic because the people are taking advice from people who know more than they do quite often. But it's also the evidence in a lot of the questions that are posted there. You can hear the stories about where they've taken advice from parents, for example, which has really led them down the garden path. Or they've taken advice from friends, and friends in particular, can be great because you think, oh, they're in the same boat as me, but still the decisions that are right for your friends may not be right for you. And also they may not have made really good decisions anyway. Just because they've managed to buy a property doesn't always mean that they did it well.
Yes.
So that's a scary thing when it comes to taking advice from friends.
Look, with parents, it is absolutely true that they only want the best for you, right? So there's no, we're not coming at this from a malicious point of view. But what worked for them when they were looking to buy their first home or upgrade to their current home might actually be outdated, and it might not work for you now. And I guess that's the point that we really want to make, is you can get really good, well-meaning advice from your parents. But the thing is, it could be completely wrong in today's context. You know, some people are really fortunate to get financial help from their parents when they're starting out, and that is great. It's great as long as there's no strings attached. Now, there's probably going to be, repayment options or something that you might have to do. But if your parents are giving you some sort of financial assistance to buy your first home, and they want to dictate the type of property or location that you buy in because they've lent you money, you might actually find yourself buying something that suits them more than it suits you. And Veronica, that might be a little recipe for disaster.
I think the big problem for a lot of first home buyers, any property buyer really for that matter, is that buying a property often turns out to be a lot more painful than people realise. And so, you think, oh God, I look to this advice that might be given, or maybe a little bit of financial help that may be given, and you see it as being a relief because it is painful. And the problem is that relief is short-lived. And I think that when you do take advice from the wrong people, particularly if it's parents when there's money involved, or particularly with friends when they're actually, they come across as an expert because they've managed to buy something.
Yeah.
We defer to them because we're in a sort of a psychological pain because actually buying is difficult. And
it's time consuming.
And it is. And you just think, I just want this to be over. And you think, okay, I've got to buy something. Once I've bought, I'm going to be out of this painful time. The worst thing is, and we hear so many stories here of people that buy and then the pressure's off and then they realize, oh my God, I made a mistake.
What have I done?
And that's the bit that is particularly scary when you're getting advice from the wrong people, because it can lead you to make these big mistakes. If we get into the other bit, is we talk about getting advice from finance, from sometimes accountants, even mortgage brokers. These people can give you great advice in their lane, but everyone's got an opinion when it comes to property. And also because as first home buyers, you often know you don't know. So you will ask these people, and if they're not careful, they will tell you stuff, and it won't necessarily be good advice about property. It'd be great about tax, for example, if you want to rent vest, or it'd be great about borrowing structures and which lender to go with, etc. if you're talking to a mortgage broker. But if it comes down to what property should I buy or how much should I pay for that property,
outside their lane, Veronica, we talk about that your support crew needs to be stay inside their lane. Step one of your first home buyer guide is building the support crew, and absolutely a finance mortgage broker is highly recommended for people to put on their support crew, but really make sure that you're talking to them and asking the questions that are inside their area of expertise. And knowing about what to pay can only usually come from them giving you a property report that's automatically generated and gives you an automated valuation. Now, anyone who's done the free course, How to Price a Property, and if you haven't, do it because it's free. If you've done it, you understand that those automated valuations can vary wildly. In one example of 10 auto valuations, we found a $299,000 discrepancy on a $740,000 property. So, no help whatsoever. You're either going to underpay and miss out all the time, or overpay and regret that when you work it out. So, in your lane, asking the right questions and then knowing what to do with that information, incredibly important, but yet definitely want them on your team for the right reasons.
And a mortgage broker that recommends a particular property is a massive red flag, because the big risk here, and this leads into our next bit, which is getting advice from property spruikers, it's all tied in here, right? Is that they will have an arrangement with, or they may have an arrangement with developers or spruikers that pays them a big fat commission if they suggest certain properties. Now, it's a deal that is beneficial to both the broker and the developer, as they get the former gets a kickback, the latter gets a property
Sells it
sold,
quickly.
right?
Yeah.
But it's very, very rarely good for the first home buyer. And in fact, both Meighan and I have seen in our inboxes emails offering us something like, the most recent one that I can think of is like $38,000 commission to recommend a $750,000 property. So brand new,
so
house and
think
land
about
package.
that.
That's mortifying. That's like basically
And once
5%.
you feel like that's not coming out of your pocket, it actually is.
Oh, yes,
so
it
you
is.
think that you're not paying that to anyone, but you would be much better paying that yourself to an independent, exclusive, experienced buyer's agent if that was a possibility, than paying it as a premium on a property to a spruiker or indirectly to a mortgage broker.
And why does it matter? It matters because when you go to sell, it basically means that you've just paid more than it's worth, because that does not form part of the value of the property. Yep. It forms part of the cost. Cost and value, two very, very different things. So be very careful when dealing with spruikers. Yeah. Spruikers are those people that can sometimes come across like they are first home buyer advisors.
Yes. We see that a lot, don't we?
Yeah. They're just, they're helping first home buyers. No, they're not. They're selling you often shit.
Yeah. And you've got to really take your blinkers off, take those rose-coloured glasses off. It is not an easy answer. It is not, and it should not be easy to buy property. You actually have to be on your toes, alert, and thinking about these kinds of mistakes that you could make and how to avoid them at every step of the way. It is worth the effort, but it is not easy. And if it's easy to buy, it's going to be difficult to sell. That's one of our Home Buyer Academy principles.
Yep.
Really, really important to keep that in mind if someone is putting something in front of you and say, here's the answer.
This makes it easy.
Yeah, this is really easy.
Which sort of does lead also into mistake number 2, which is using grants without knowing the risk. And one of the aspects of the grants, it does tie in with brand new property, because a lot of grants are offered only if you buy a brand new property, right? So they are designed to help supply, right? So you as one tiny little individual first home buyer are helping supply the nation with property by buying something brand new, right?
Yeah.
So this is the thing that we most worry about. This is that it is the most risky segment of the market, the brand new segment of the market. And of course, if you're getting grants and you're trying to get the grants, and your broker is the best person to talk to about how to get those grants and how they are, and whether you qualify and what the restrictions are and all the rest of it. But the problem is with that conversation, it can go down the wrong path, because if you are just trying to get the grants and you're forgetting for a moment the bigger picture, then you can sometimes funnel yourself into buying the wrong type of property, or having the wrong budget. There's lots of limitations around this. So what you've got to be careful about is allowing the grants to skew your behaviour, I guess, into buying a brand new property or under a certain price threshold.
Price range, yeah. And that's really important. So knowledge is power. It's really, really important to get that information, to understand it as it applies to your situation, but not let it be. What we're trying to say is, don't let that be the reason that you choose a particular property because you get a little bit of extra money. And we do see sometimes people say, well, it's free money. Why wouldn't I take it? And the reason is because by doing that, you're actually pigeonholing yourself into a similar type product that only other people like you will want to buy.
Yeah.
So if there's only other people like you, so first home buyers, if it's only a whole heap of you guys buying that product, who are you going to sell it to? Because when you go to sell it, it's not a new property anymore. And this is what we really want you to understand about why this is a risk and a potential mistake. It does work for some people, right? So it's not a blanket don't do it. It's knowledge is power. If you go to sell that property down the track and there is no market for it, then the problem is you could actually end up selling it for less because you haven't got a big group of people who want to buy that property. We talk about scarcity, we talk about the future buyer when it comes to capital growth over the long term. And if there's no one to buy that property down the track, then that's your risk. And you won't know that until you go to sell.
And again, anything that makes it seem like, oh, thank God, this is easy, I can actually get into the market. You just got to be very careful that whilst you're going to want to lean into that, you're going to want to go, yes, just so I want this pain to be over, you could be creating yourself a whole new lot of pain. Now,
and brand new and shiny is great. Like it feels really good. Oh, it's brand new. No one's ever lived in it before. It's shiny. I can have my own colours. there's some really positive things that you can feel about that. It's just take those rose-coloured glasses off and look really carefully at these kinds of things.
Yeah, because the reality is that, as Meighan said, not everybody loses money when they buy a brand new property, right? But there is a very high incidence of people who do lose money when they buy a brand new property. So it's not like it's the odd person. It actually is quite common. It is not difficult to find people and meet people that have lost money when buying brand new property. You know, we have those conversations all the time with people. Everyone, when they meet a property person, wants to talk about their property story, good and bad.
Yeah.
And we just hear them all the time. So this is not something that is a real rarity. It's actually quite common, which is scary.
Yeah. And there's lots of risks, okay? So we're talking here about mistake number 2, which is using grants without knowing the risks. We're talking about some of those risks being that they inspire you or they almost kind of force you to buy brand new, right? So that's a big mistake. There's lots of risks there. And of course, we've got a download that you can click and download, and it actually goes into a lot more of the risks than what we're talking about here in this short segment.
But we'll say, though, that the other risk about the grants, so yes, they funnel you into brand new property most of the time, but also they have these spending limits.
Yeah.
And so if you can actually afford, a bigger, better house in a better location or whatever, but you're trying to constrain your budget because you want to get the free money, long term, that free money could actually end up costing you more because you're foregoing capital growth. Or it means that you have to upgrade and sell and trade up quicker, there's costs associated with that as well. So you really always got to be thinking long term when it comes to property. And this is where some of the other traps that can come into when you're trying to, using the grant or getting the grant, but basically turn yourself into a pretzel in order to be able to actually qualify for it.
And that leads into mistake number 3. And you just said it then, buying without a long-term view. Yeah, no, that sometimes you feel like, oh, there's a grant available. Quick, let's see if we qualify. Oh, quick, let's see if we can afford it. Oh, we can. Okay, quick, let's do it. And if you jump into a purchase because you want to get on the property ladder and you feel like, if I just buy anything, at least I'm on the ladder. I've got that first foot on the ladder and it's all up from there. And I think the thing that we want you to step back and look at is not every property is going to deliver the potential for long-term capital growth, and capital growth matters. Okay, so if you don't have a long-term view about the property, if you're just simply like, oh, God, I need to get out of this rental, the owner's selling it, I don't know where to go, I don't know where to live, I don't want to live with mum and dad, it'd do my head in if I had to, and you go, quick, there's a grant, let's do it, we can do it now. If you don't have that long-term view, what is this property going to achieve for you in the long term? How long are you going to live there? When are you going to want to upgrade? Does it suit your circumstances just for a short period of time or a longer period of time? You got to really step back and think about, what is my long-term plan for myself, my partner if there's one, my children if there are any or planned, and really get a little bit analytical and logical about it.
Absolutely, and this is the thing that the costs to get in, obviously as a first home buyer, you're knowing how much you've got to save for a deposit. Hopefully you're aware of all those additional costs that go into the purchasing costs, right? And we've got a blog on that. We can probably put that in the show notes, and so you can check that out. Because the reality is that there are lots of other things that can take you by surprise. So you're listening to this podcast, you're probably well aware of all these things. That's great, right? So you save all that, you squirrel that away, you then just want to get into the market. And it's like, then there's the next thing. So once you're sort of over that first hurdle, the next thing is, oh, it's not big enough. Or, oh, I really don't like living here. Or, oh, there's another subdivision going up over the back fence and I hadn't even thought about that. Or, oh, and this is, you might not think, oh, God, that's never going to happen to me. If I just can get a property, I'm going to feel so good. But this actually happens all the time.
Yeah.
The reality. And it's like just lifting your eyes a little bit, looking a little bit further out there into the horizon to make sure that you make better long-term decisions. Both Meighan and I screwed up. Well, we were lucky enough not to completely screw up our first purchases.
Yeah.
But we missed opportunities and we did make some of these mistakes. Certainly I did, by not having a long-term view. I just wanted to get into the market, never even thought about. I mean, in fact, I outgrew that property in a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's cost to go in, as you say.
Yes.
Sometimes stamp duty is waived or concessional. And, great, you can say, well,
but not on the next one.
But it won't be on the next one. That's exactly right. So you might have skipped it on the first one, but if you've got to upgrade, you're going to have it on the second one. So have that long-term view.
It'll come and bite you in the bum. It's like if you don't think about the long term, the long term will think about you. Will come around and whack you in the face, And this is the thing about property, right? It's expensive. It's hard to get into.
Yeah,
it can be hard to get out of too if you're not careful. And it's expensive to transact and trade. Like once you're in the market, it's somewhat easier, but it's still expensive. So
only if that property is going up in at least the capital gain is at least in line with the area that you're going to upgrade into.
Exactly. Yeah. So all this
Otherwise
stuff,
you'll be left behind.
Very, very important without a focus on this. And as property becomes more and more expensive as it is, and there's this big affordability crisis in this country, we've had an affordability crisis for a long, long time. It's just that there's more talk about it, I think. But as property does get more expensive, right, this problem will never go away. It's always going to be an issue. So that long-term focus is just extra, extra, extra important. Back in the day where maybe 500,000 got you into first home, now it's $1 million, as prices go up, the property gets bigger, the problem gets bigger.
Yeah, it does.
Therefore, you must have long-term
make
focus.
really good decisions. Yep. Look, most first-home buyers don't become aware of the mistakes they've made until they decide to put their property on the market to sell, or they get it revalued. But if you really think about some of these mistakes and with the right due diligence and learning from other people's mistakes, you can confidently step onto the property ladder and purchase the best quality property for you. And that is what this is about.
Exactly right. Now, a quick note. You might think that we cover everything that you need to know in these podcasts, but a word of warning, we do not. We are just scratching the surface here. And if you really want to become an educated first home buyer, which of course is what we encourage you to do, you need to learn all of the steps to take and how to do everything in the right order.
Our first home buyer guide course only costs $990 and you get direct access to us to help guide you through your negotiations. That's Campfire every Wednesday. Talk to us. You can also share the link of any property you're thinking of buying and we can help you work out whether it's A, B or C grade or an absolute no-go zone. Trust me, you'll buy better with our guidance and you'll overpay by a lot more than $1,000 if you don't know what you're doing or you make some of these mistakes that we've talked about today. In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out your first home buyer guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.